Back in the 90s, Kevin Costner was a huge star. He had movies like Dances with Wolves, Field of Dreams. He was a big deal. And I remember watching those movies as a kid on TV or whatever, and they were pretty great. So when the movie The Postman came out, I thought, that looks pretty cool. Big epic movie, Kevin Costner, sounds great. And I'm pretty sure my dad and I went to go see it one Saturday afternoon or whatever. It was pretty fun. It was pretty enjoyable. It was about this post-apocalyptic world. And so, I have fairly fond memories of the movie. Now, fast forward to recently, I just finished reading the book, The Postman, which the movie was based off of. And overall, I enjoyed it. It was a good book. Was it the greatest sci-fi book ever? Probably not. So let's get into it. So my overall experience reading The Postman was good. The story itself covers the idea that it's a post-apocalyptic world. There's this big apocalypse situation that happens, sound like nuclear warfare or something, and pretty much blew up the United States, probably the rest of the world with it. Some people survived, and the United States as a country, as a government, as a functioning society no longer exists. Instead, people are just trying to do what they can to survive. There's obviously like bandits and outlaws, and it's a bit like the video game Fallout in that regard. The story follows our hero who basically goes along and he's just kind of a survival, like he just wants to survive, and he's an actor with like a philosophy background. So what ends up happening is he stumbles across an old postal van, basically, full of mail and a dead postal carrier's outfit. And he starts wearing that and comes up with a story saying that he is part of the restored United States of America. He's a postman. There's this president. There's this whole thing that's a little bit hokey, but it works, and it basically gets him food and shelter, which is all he really wanted in the first place. Where this goes from kind of just a okay sort of thing to a very interesting story is the story of the United States being restored, though a lie, a complete fabrication, spirals wildly out of control. And he then ends up taking on the mantle of the postman, and that he's basically ends up leading an army ultimately of these postal carriers and these settlers and people who want to believe in this restored United States, even though it's not true and they just don't know it. At the same time, there are some other things going on in the world. Like there's this settlement that has this big computer that can answer questions and help people restore technology. And then there's this sort of group of survivalist bandits that are called the Wholeness, and they're kind of like an army, basically. And so our hero, our protagonist, has run-ins with those characters and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the high level of what happens, and ultimately it ends up in a battle between basically our hero and the bad guys, the Wholeness, and so on and so forth. There are some things that, again, between the book and the movie, and I haven't gone back and rewatched the movie, I'll probably go back and do that at some point, but there are some things that are definitely different between the book and the movie. The movie has, I would say, it got restructured to be a better, more entertaining movie that's a little bit easier to follow, whereas the book you're following the hero around and it kind of meanders around a bit. And eventually you get to a conclusion, but I would say that the movie is much more direct about sort of here to there and how it's going to tell that story, whereas the book's ending feels a little bit random in a way. I mean, there's foreshadowing and all of that, but it kind of has a bit of a Deus Ex Machina kind of ending, yeah, okay, it was that thing, cool. The kind of theme of the book is very much seemingly about the when a lie spirals out of control and people start believing in it, and what that ultimately does to society and hope and all of those kind of things. And that's interesting. But then there's these kind of other lies and these other things. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like there's some, let's say, lies and half-truths behind this Postman idea in the restored United States, but there's also some of that behind the wholeness people too, and there's also some of that behind the technology people. And our hero eventually kind of gets to see behind the curtain of all of those and doesn't really know what to think about it. At the same time, he also has relationships with people that are kind of built on lies, but they then end up turning into real emotional relationships. What happens when this guy's whole life at a certain point is built upon a lie that's not really intended to hurt anyone, but just spirals out of control and then does end up hurting people, like people die, people who follow him get massacred, like it's this whole thing. So one last thing I would probably say in regard to my book review here is I don't think I would have read the book if I hadn't seen the movie. And if you're maybe not as interested in reading this book, or maybe it's not your favorite author or whatever, I probably would have never heard about this book if the movie didn't exist. So you could watch the movie and go, oh, this is a fun story. Maybe the book would be fun too. If you like the movie, I think you would like the book. If you like the book, you may or may not like the movie. I don't know. In terms of like, is it a very strong recommendation? Kinda. It's a book that I don't feel bad reading. I enjoyed reading, but at the same time, it's not a book where I would go to you or one of my friends and say, I just finished The Postman. It was amazing. You should go read it. It's kind of like, if you like the movie or you happen to be interested in the story, yeah, check it out. It's a fun read. But otherwise, you could not read it and be fine too. So that's what I got for my Postman book review. Thanks for watching.